In her dreams, Adara wasn't a short, freckled, chubby, lonely woman tossing and turning in an isolated tower. She was a dragon, powerful and strong. She swam through the air like a shark swims through water, and she rejoiced to feel the burn in her muscles as she climbed closer toward the moon. The air was fresh and delicious like sparkling wine. Exhilarated, she rose above the sea of clouds, delighted in the way the moon silvered their swirling peaks. With a triumphant howl, she increased her speed and flew so fast the stars blurred. Falling like snowflakes around her shoulders, she began to pirouette in loops, relishing strong rush of wind over her whole body. Her dragon's laugh lit the night, a pillar of red gold flame that reached out to tickle the edges of the moon. The cold wind of the upper reaches of the night scraped her lungs as she heaved herself upward, and the breeze slapped and stung her skin. She heaved and surged until she heard a boom of thunder behind her. She was moving so fast that the air itself couldn't catch her. It clapped shut behind her as if she was a lightning bolt, and at last she reached her goal, the distant moon. There she perched on a rocky crag beside an endless sea of silver sand, scraping idly with her claws. She looked at the floating island of Camelot lying beneath her, barely visible between a gap in the clouds, a twinkling castle lit up with tiny lights. It, it's,
Hmm.
it's good to be so far away from it, she murmured. Oh, really? Said Zohar's voice from beside her. She turned. Like her, he was not in his human form. She smiled to see the form of his angel beast, his spirit traveler, an enormous night-dark hawk, nearly as big as a dragon, coming all the way up to her shoulder in height. His black wings reminded her of the black cloak he was so fond of dramatically swirling over his shoulder, but they were silver-tipped, as if the stars had caught and clung to them. His eyes were dark and guarded, but had the liveliest glow in them too, like an ebony chair lit by the light of a cozy fire.
You're beautiful.
More beautiful than the city you left behind?
Yes, it's a relief to leave Camelot behind.
Why so eager to leave your hearth and home, little dragon?
I dread the morning. I dread each hour that passes in my life as if it were this heavy stone added to this pack around my shoulders. I keep trying to figure out how to make my husband happy, but no matter what I do, I seem to push him farther away. He just keeps telling me, more crystals, more crystals. Fill more crystals with magic, and then we'll be happy. So I fill his crystals with my magic until my head aches and my fingers hurt, and then he says, more. So I wonder, will anything I do ever be good enough for him?
You are a dragon. If you don't want to fill crystals with magic, simply refuse. Who dares tell a dragon what to do?
I do what he pleases because I love him, though.
Zohar croaked, a long, cynical croak, a raven's voice rather than a man's. She couldn't tell whether it was a laugh of irony or a moan of lament. Yes, he said after clearing his throat. Love indeed is a terrible bond, I know it well.
Don't say it like that. How can we get by without love?
I do well enough.
That is complete and utter bullshit. No one gets by without love.
And why not? Said Zohar, flying backwards from her fire.
Okay, look at the stars, Zohar. They look like each of them are alone, aren't they? But it's not true. They're linked to each other in a cosmic dance, each of them pulling on the other through forces subtle and strong. Even if we think we're completely alone in the deep blackness of space, love is still pulling on us The love of our ancestors, distant friends, friends not yet met, the love of generations yet to come, babies and babies' babies, calling on us through space and time to serve and care for them. The person who thinks himself independent of that weight and pull is the biggest fool of them all.
Zohar settled himself back on his perch and gave his ruffled feathers a preen or two with his beak. I know that. I was just testing to see if you knew.
Okay. All right. You want to race me?
What?
I want to see which one of us can fly farther and faster. Come on, race me.
I have no need for childish competitions.
Oh, interesting. If you're afraid that I'm faster than you.
And Adara thus goaded Zohar, and he took off. It was like the first flight, but better. Adara's belief that she could move faster than the impertinent hawk took her farther than she had ever flown before. She gloried in testing her wings against his, the desire to compete with his elegance and power, unlocking new abilities within herself. The stars seemed to fly with them in a dizzying, glorious, splendid array, as if they were silver birds themselves, part of a flock. The wind in her ears sounded like angels singing and whoomp. She woke up. The king was standing by her bedside, shaking her shoulder. You're behind on your new quota for filling magic crystals. The harder they worked Adara in the weeks that followed, the more she dreamed. The stupendous glory of her dream self seemed to grow in proportion to how her real self became shrunken and meek. She began to dread the day when she finished Zohar's bottle of dream potion. The only time her soul seemed alive was when it flew in her sleep alongside his own. One particular day, the king insisted on her filling a crystal almost as tall as she was with magic. She thought she couldn't do it at first, and when she finally managed to crank it out, she almost fainted. But it was worth it to see the faint smile on the king's face, to get that approving pat on the head from him. If not the much longed for, well done. Her dragon was so drained and tiny after the ordeal, it curled up in her empty teacup to get warm. Adara began to be quite worried about it, and decided to take the wee creature to the palace's kitchen fires to get warm and big again. She picked up the teacup, listening to the pitiful warbling and complaining of the dragon as she shuffled across her gardens in her bathrobe and slippers. Dressed like a ragamuffin after her long day, they didn't recognize her as the queen in the kitchen. Come on now, the chef said. No beggars at this entrance. You want a petition for emergency housing, you have to move down this hallway and take 2 rights and a left. He shoved her into the hallway before she had the energy to explain. Her dragon didn't even bother to hiss. The cook's youngest apprentice darted after her with a teapot. I'm sorry, he whispered, giving her an apologetic smile and a pat on the shoulder. Then he filled her teacup with tea, not even noticing the tiny dragon in the bottom. Usually Adara's dragon hated being overlooked, but today she was just overjoyed to have tea poured over her. She burbled in pleasure, luxuriating in the tea as if it was a hot bath. The rejuvenating warmth made her slightly larger, and also her color started to get slightly more golden. Before, she had been colored the deep brown of discouragement.
Marble blurp,
said the dragon to Adara. And Adara, who understood dragon language, answered back.
You're right. We've never been in this part of the palace before, so we might as well explore, huh?
The halls and rooms were gray and stark and functional, not like the glittering public rooms she queened in. To her surprise, she heard her husband's voice raised in argument with his advisors. About to peek into the room to say hi, the words she heard froze her mid-step. If Adara creates just 5 more huge crystals, we'll have enough power to fuel a warship that can destroy any city in this dimension, said the chief of security excitedly.
That was very Batman villain Alice. Thank you.
Are we stopped? No? Okay.
No, we pause for friendly banter. That's part of the point of this channel, remember?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. That fool, thought Adara. We provide security for travelers, protect them against pirates. We don't need city destroying artillery. He's so obsessed with having the biggest and best toys that he's completely lost track of our mission as a kingdom. That is ridiculous.
She squared her shoulders and made her step firm, preparing to burst into the conference room. There's no sense working my wife until she drops, said Percival. She was practically gray when I collected the mega crystal from her. He really cares
about me,
was Adara's first thought, her dragon getting bigger and pinker with pleasure, then a creeping doubt, and the dragon got a little purple and gray around the edges.
Why isn't he reacting to the part about the warships? That's odd.
Her hand paused at the latch to the cracked open door. Percival continued. Come on, let's be real here. You don't get milk by beating the cow. Her doctor tells me that the rate of crystal production she's on is already increasing her risk of heart attack.
What?
Her dragon dropped all the way down, from pink to purple, then to pure black. It cowered against the floor as if trying to melt into the cobblestones. Have you gone soft, Percival? Said the chief of security acerbically. We all agreed that the point of you marrying the witch in the first place was to secure her resources to the kingdom. This is no time to draw back from maximizing production, the head of accounting agreed in his robotic, scratchy voice. Yeah, if she dies at zero production, said Percival with a shrug in his voice. Adara felt something inside her shattering like glass. So sorry. Send the engineers back to the drawing board and find a way to make our invasion plans work with the realistic crystal production rates I will project. The dragon started crying, a tiny whine like steam leaking out of a kettle. Adara scooped up her dragon in her hands and shushed it by clamping her fingers around its suddenly tiny jaws. As she continued listening, it shrank and shrank in her hands until it was no larger than a beetle, and the wailing sound it was making was like the hum of an insect, tiny, high-pitched, and shattering all her nerves like glass. Let me look at those numbers, said the chief engineer. What's driving this invasion timetable again? Asked the head of HR, an amiable blonde-haired woman who always seemed to be out of the loop. Our competitors drive the timetable, said Percival. Valhalla is moving in our private security business by training a strike team of Valkyries. I was outraged when I heard about it. I feel Valkyries are supposed to be nurses and morticians, not warriors. To defend our monopoly on security here in the Luminous Dimension, we have to develop overwhelming forces to bring Valhalla in line. Legendary Valkyries were warriors, the head of HR observed. Well, we don't live in legends. We live in cold, harsh reality, and we need to defend our monopoly, even if it means threatening the lives and livelihoods. It's the way my father did business. It's the way my grandfather did business. I don't like it any more than you do, but there's just no choice. Adara opened the hands that were cupped around her dragon and whispered to the terrified, whimpering little creature.
But there is always a choice.
And then, subdued, her shoulders hunched, she tiptoed back to her tower. She stayed up all night staring at the ceiling, and when the sun rose, she didn't move, except to drink water or go to the bathroom, until her husband burst into her bedroom, demanding to know why her daily crystals hadn't been placed in the production hamper. I understand you might be tired from yesterday, but you could at least make a little effort.
Is the work you're asking me to do putting me at risk of a heart attack?
His face melted for a second into something ugly and raw, then bounced back into place. Of course not. I would never risk you, my beloved wife. Your doctors have been concerned, yes, but I'm making sure we keep your efforts within acceptable parameters.
Do you avoid risking me because you love me? Or because you want to make sure I keep on making crystals?
Her body feeling as heavy as iron, hands too heavy to wipe the tears, which made little trails from the corners of her eyes into her sweat soaked red hair. Percival took a huge, huffing breath, then seemed to pull himself together. I'm deeply insulted and wounded that you would even suggest such a thing. Don't you see everything I do for you? Haven't I disarranged my entire existence to accommodate you and your hulking dragon beast? How can you possibly be so ungrateful?
You know I believe in the mission of Camelot. E- to keep travelers safe. That's why I work so hard on the crystals. I care about people being safe. I care about saving lives.
Of course, that's what we all care about in Camelot, which is precisely why it's so abominable. You have made absolutely no effort today.
Why are my crystals going to be used in warships for an invasion?
Who told you that lie? What traitor has been filling you with sedition?
No one told me that.
Someone must have. You would never defy me on your own. Who has gotten to you?
I haven't been talking to anyone. You keep me too busy making crystals to make friends. Not unless you count Zohar.
Who is Zohar?
Oh, you know, just the musician who played our annual ball. We talk to each other while we're dreaming sometimes. Whatever, he's not got anything to do with this argument. He never talked to me about the warships. How would he know? The person who told me, Percival, is yourself. I overheard your meeting yesterday. That's what happened.
Percival froze. You misunderstood. You heard some misplaced humor out of context. I would never declare an invasion, Adara, not for a good reason. Valhalla needs to be restrained. If you hear the real reasons, you'll see it just as I do. Adara desperately wanted to believe him, because then her life would snap back into its old familiar shape. But she couldn't.
Listen, Percival. I was taken from my father when I was a small child because he invented magical spells that were used in warfare. They told me when I was a small child that I was full of dangerous magic, that my dragon was full of the power to destroy. But they would make sure I never hurt anybody if I just went along with them and did as I was told. The goal of my entire friggin' life is to avoid hurting people the way my father hurt me and others. There's nothing you can say to me to convince me that warships keep people safe. They just don't. There's nothing that justifies the potential for that kind of destruction in human hands. There just isn't.
I thought you loved me. I thought you trusted me. You won't even listen to my point of view. Do you think I'm stupid or something?
You're not stupid. You're just a lot younger than me. When you've lived as many lifetimes as I have, you realize that violence on a massive scale is about intimidation, not protection. And intimidation always backfires, you know. Always.
Just because you've sat in a tower for hundreds of years, checking the internet and watching TV, doesn't mean you understand life. You should respect me as the monarch of this kingdom, the CEO of this corporation. I have real life experience. I have street smarts. You don't have that.
Street smarts? You want to talk street smarts? When I was 5 years old and my father lost his mind, I enchanted my toys to grow into enormous monsters that would clobber him. I tried to intimidate him, but when the Wizards Council came to our family home, they were intimidated by me. I'll never forget how frightened they looked. I didn't feel like a kid. I didn't feel like a human. Wielding that kind of power, I became something other, something distant and apart from humanity. I never want to feel that way again. If I'm the one fueling your warships, I'm no longer the cute little witch next door. I'm a monster to be put down. And the other kingdoms will treat me that way, like your pet monster. Do you think I'll elude their vengeance forever? No, Percival. You don't want to toy with these kind of forces. I am your wife. Trust me.
You know nothing of warfare. You wouldn't be defying me if your insidious friend hadn't been filling your ears with whispers against me.
What?
Zohar, he's trying to corrupt you, seduce you away from me.
That's ridiculous! We don't even talk about you!
Oh, avoiding the subject of your husband with your new friend?
That's nothing to do with anything! We're talking about magic crystal policy, not who I choose to be my friend.
This isn't any innocent friendship, is it? Percival said, sensing weakness. Her embarrassing air and pink cheeks were impossible to mistake. You said you talked to him for hours and hours in your dreams. Adara, is this an emotional affair? Here you are, accusing me of betraying you, when you're betraying me on the most intimate level.
I don't even understand how we got on this topic. I love you, Percival, not anyone else, but you have to believe me. You've chosen a bad path for this kingdom.
You're a traitor who spends her nights in conversation with an adulterous seditionist. I'll have to take thought on how to restrain your treachery. Good night. And he stormed out of the room. The dragon always flew out of the tower when Percival was around, but had been listening carefully at the window the whole time, growing bigger and bigger the more Adara asserted herself. Its color was a deep blood red. Once Percival was gone, it flew in the window and wrapped itself around Adara, a huge, coiling, snake-like hug. The next day, Percival came to Adara with a silver ring in the shape of a dragon. This will bind you and the beast to me. I have consulted the finest magicians on how to deal with your treachery.
I'm not a traitor. I'll wear any spell you want because I love you, but you don't have to bind me to anything.
Percival wasn't listening. He seized her hand and forced the ring over her finger while she trembled. The ring binds you to the truth. It will keep you from lying to me.
I've never lied to you.
Thereafter, following an interrogation hours long, the longer she talked, the more displeased Percival seemed to be with her answers.
I'm not plotting sedition. I'm not planning to have an affair. I don't love anyone but you. I just object to military crystals on moral grounds. Why can't you see that?
Do you think you're better than me?
No, I don't think I'm better than you. I love you.
You're lying.
How can I be lying to you when I'm wearing a magic ring that literally forces me to tell the truth?
She tried to pull off the ring and throw it in his face, but the little silver dragon on the ring dug its claws and teeth into her flesh and clamped. There was no way to take it off, short of cutting off her entire finger. On his way out, Percival took the potion she had used to dream of Zohar and poured it down the sink. Adara hadn't known Zohar for long. He wasn't even truly important to her, but the honest conversation their souls shared in the dim hours of the night had been a refuge of sorts. She watched the potion trickle down the drain against the despairing resignation of someone watching the last of her heart's blood trickle away. How had she come to this?
We take our crystals back. We won't let them be misused.
And her dragon turned the jet black of absolute determination. When she approached the treasury at midnight, she nodded pleasantly to the guards, pretending to be on a routine errand. It was no use. You're not allowed in here anymore, they said, turning on the web of lasers that crisscrossed the door. She thought about shrinking back, apologizing, being the charming little queen. That just wasn't an option anymore. She couldn't pretend. She couldn't pretend to be afraid of them when their weapons were like child's toys to her. She was afraid of hurting their feelings. She was afraid of losing her place in Camelot. She was afraid of making them feel less like men. But she wasn't afraid of any of the pathetic weapons they had at their disposal.
Dragon?
Said Adara, lifting an eyebrow, and the jet-black dragon grew to ceiling height and hissed so hard steam filled the entire corridor. The guards were frantically calling for backup on their hollow watches when Dragon put out one silver claw, long as a chef's knife. Snick was the sound it made, and used it to cut the door frame away from the wall. The elaborate apparatus of laser webbing clunked to the floor, hissing and sparking. Then the guards tried to shoot Dragon, and she just absorbed their lasers into her skin, basking in them like they were jets of red water from a refreshing shower. She opened her jaws and hissed in their faces, and they flinched back, screaming into their hollow watches for backup. Then they started shooting her in the face. Irritated by the blinky lights getting too close to her eyes, she opened her mouth and ate their weapons. Adara screamed
No,
frantically.
don't bite off their hands! Don't bite off their hands!
At that point, the guards turned and ran. The dragon picked her way over the broken laser net with the daintiness of a disdainful cat. The hole she had carved in the wall wasn't quite big enough for her steadily swelling shoulders, so she leaned into the wall and broke the hole bigger. Adara tried not to smile as the rubble cascaded off the dragon's wings and shoulders, but something about the utter chaos and destruction just made her heart glad. Adara started feeding the magic crystals in her treasury to her dragon, who gobbled them up like tasty fruits. Each time she consumed a new one, her black skin lit up with hundreds of little lights like a map of the starry sky. Adara was reminded of how the silver flecks had glowed in the wings of Zohar's black star hawk. Perhaps, if she hadn't been constantly draining herself of her own magic, Dragon would have always been this beautiful. She was about halfway through feeding the crystals to the dragon when Percival, the chief of security, and a troop of 50 heavily armed and armored men burst on the scene. "You can't do this!" Percival screamed.
You'll find that I can. Look, I am literally doing it.
She fed another batch of crystal to her dragon, who let out a large and insolent belch. The chief engineer arrived in the scene. "It's all right," he soothed Percival. "Most of the crystals are built into the palace's power grid. It's only the ones I haven't installed yet that are stored in the treasury."
I thought it seemed like a lot of the crystals were missing.
As 50 weapons pointed at her, she smiled at the chief of security, and her dragon, standing to her side, smiled identically. Only the dragon had a lot more teeth than she did.
You can't shoot me, Hotshot. I'm your goose that lays the golden eggs.
Unfortunately, that's true. Adara, what are you doing? Have you gone insane?
No, all of you have. I am the only sane one of the bunch. And you know why? Because I'm the only one of you that isn't secretly planning how to build a giant warship that kills children.
I thought you had her under control, the chief of security told King Percival. Our enemies have gotten to her somehow, said Percival, his eyes flaming with paranoia. Be reasonable, Adara, said the chief of security. This little tantrum you're throwing is pointless, and you'll just have to work harder to make up the difference later. The crystals you've created are installed in hundreds of locations around the palace, and we can use them to power more devices to control you. You don't know where we've installed them. I'm the only one with the blueprints, and there's no way you can fight against years of your own work. It's hopeless. The only way to neutralize all of them would be to burn the entire palace.
Burn the entire palace, you say? Thanks for telling me. Bup, bup, bup. Alert! Alert! Emergency broadcast! The palace is on fire! Repeat, this is not a drill.
The palace isn't on fire? Why are you saying that?
Correction. The palace isn't on fire. Yet.
The chief of accounting, a latecomer to the party, heard only the latest. His face turned absolutely white. Adara, don't do this. Do you know how many billions of dollars this palace is worth?
Evacuate! This is not a drill. Yes, I do know exactly how many billions this place is worth. I work in your department, remember? I know exactly what this will do to Camelot's stock price.
Why are you doing this?
Because it's better to kill stock prices than people! Stand back, everyone.
I will not stand back, said Percival, striding forward.
Stand back!
Adara repeated, her hair bursting into flames several feet high, the highest Percival had ever seen them go. The dragon, who had been growing this whole time until its head was barely small enough to fit in a palace hallway, opened her jaws. Percival barely jumped back in time. A long pillar of red, gold, and orange flame extended from the dragon's mouth along the whole length of the treasury. The palace sprinkler system turned on and fizzled away ineffectually at the dripping pools of lava the pillar left everywhere it touched.
I need you to oversee the evacuation. I don't want anybody to be hurt, said I to
the chief of security. You don't tell me what to do.
Dragon?
The dragon picked up the important man in her jaws, holding him by the back of his pants. He struggled wildly, firing several shots, one of which barely missed Percival. Dragon rammed the ceiling with her head, creating a hole that rubble rained down from, and then she placed the chief of security carefully on the roof.
Now you are outside the building. Outside. Outside is where you want to be. Everyone else needs to be outside too.
One by one, Dragon picked up all of them in her jaws and spat them on the roof.
It will take a while for everything to burn down. Make sure you're off the roof by then. There are fire escape ladders everywhere. You should be fine.
You fucking whore. You're doing this so you can whore around with your musician friend. The dragon shrank a few feet smaller at that, but Adara gritted her teeth and rallied herself.
Goodbye, Percival. I never wanted to do you wrong.
The room cleared of people. The dragon clacked her jaws hungrily. Adara peeked at her hollow watch.
The security cameras report that people are following their fire evacuation drills. I think it's safe to blast.
And dragon fire poured out on the building like an unsupervised toddler pouring out paint. Adara sat on her back, occasionally turning Dragon's attention this way or that. Each time a crystal melted, Adara felt that crystal's power return to her. Each time Dragon saw a person who hadn't followed the drill, she picked them up and carefully brought them to safety, usually as they screamed and struggled hysterically. And in the morning, there was nothing left but ash. Ash and a large horde of angry, inconvenienced people. I've summoned all our troops back home from their contracts, Percival said, confronting Adara across the ruins. You won't get away with this. Not even a dragon could face down all the knights and helicopters of Camelot.
You know, y'all keep giving me free information. You'd think at some point you'd fucking learn.
What do you mean?
When is the backup arriving?
45 minutes! You'll never escape!
You've never measured how fast my dragon flies, have you?
You can't leave! You have to face justice! Look at all you've destroyed!
I destroyed this to save lives. If there's justice, it's on my side.
Are you sure about that? Said the chief of security in tones of silky softness. And Adara, in disbelieving horror, saw him holding up the charred body of a person in a chef's uniform.
Oh my god, it's the guy who gave me tea.
Some falling rubble blocked the exit to the walk-in freezer. He was working the night shift, preparing dough for the morning pastries. He wasn't in the sleeping quarters we have for our office workers. There was no one to help him evacuate. You think you're so high and mighty, so far above us. But when push came to shove, you killed to achieve your goals. You killed to reclaim your power. You think you're so different from us. You think you have a moral argument. Show me the difference, Adara. Show me the difference. Adara's whole body froze in shock. Maybe I am just like my father, she thought.
It all felt so good when I was burning everything. When I was unleashing all the fire in my body and soul, all the frustration pent up by hundreds of years of being good, years of behaving. I was wrong to trust that feeling. I was wrong to give in to it. Here's a man who will never come home to his family again.
They were closing in on her. Hold out your wrists, Adara, said the chief of security, gently, pulling out his handcuffs. Perhaps your lawyer will plead an insanity defense. There's still hope for you, even after everything you've done. We are the Knights of Camelot. We represent law, order, safety, security, and most of all, justice. You're going to face justice. Adara held out her wrists. What else could she do? She had done wrong. And then her dragon reared in the air, bellowing its anguish to the sky, tearing the air with its paws. Having tasted freedom just once, the noble creature could no longer bear the thought of imprisonment. It snatched Adara in his jaws before those sinister silver cuffs could close around her wrists.
Hey, what are you doing?
But in that moment, the dragon was in control, not her. Not all the iron force of her conscience could repress her soul's desire to be free. They flew until their wings ached. The dimension of Liminus was mostly clouds and mist, dotted there and here with floating islands. Most were inhabited cities, but a few were abandoned experiments. The sun was falling in the sky before Adara finally dropped down into a ghost town built on a deserted cloud. She had torn clothes, an ashy face, and a few crystals in her pockets. And other than that, not a real thing of value to her name. Her holowatch told her that a fabulous reward was being offered for her capture, dead or alive. All her accounts were frozen, all her IDs were compromised. Her throat ached and her nose stung from crying. She was hungry, thirsty, and cold. She didn't know where to go. So, of course, death came to visit her. You can always come with me. Death hadn't counted on how big her dragon was right now. It shot out a jet of flame at him, singeing his robes, and Adara was startled into saying,
Death, fuck off.
She'd never spoken to him that way before. He vanished in a puff of outrage. Adara stared into her dragon's huge golden eyes.
Now what?
The dragon blurbled and turned
Blub, blub,
green.
blub.
Adara knew exactly what she meant.
You're right. He's my only friend now.
And she leaned against the dragon's flank and closed her eyes, hoping against hope she would find her way to Zohar in her sleep, even without the help of the potion. In her dreams, she was her dragon, and her dragon was her, and they wandered the dark and empty skies, filling them with wails.
Help! Help!
And Zohar heard. His first and primary emotion was annoyance. I don't want to go flying tonight. I wasn't expecting it. I'm having a lovely dream about eating sweets. Go away.
All right, but before I go, can you tell me, is there forgiveness for one who has killed a man?
What?
Is there forgiveness for one who has killed a man? Can I be forgiven?
How did you kill him?
It was an accident. I didn't mean to do anything bad, just burn down the palace.
She could dimly see Zohar as if through a mist. He was sitting at a table surrounded by slices of cake and pie. Without the potion, the connection between their minds wasn't working quite as well as usual. You didn't burn down the palace.
I did, and I don't know what to do next.
This must just be a crazy dream. You're not really Adara, are you? You're just my subconscious. I should go back to eating cake.
No, Zohar, you have to help me, please. Tell me where to go.
You should go to Poetwood. Catch my next concert. We're performing at Strange Haven. If you've really become a murderer, you can just blend into the crowd there. Most of them are up to no good. Also, the chicken wings are great there. I wish I could say the same for the dessert. Speaking of which, the cream pies are being served now. So goodbye, fake Adara. Maybe I'll dream about the real Adara next time. When Adara woke up the next morning, her whole body was aching, and her head was killing her.
I guess we're going to Strange Haven.
Dear reader, Adara's in a tight spot, but at least she's escaped that nasty palace. and there's nothing like a plate of nice wings when your spirits are down. Tune in next time to find out what the former queen and current fugitive decides to do with her life.